All right, YouTube, it seems I no sooner say that I'm going to cover a little bit less of the political material and try to get to some other issues, the garden, the occult, and so forth, that something major happens. Most of you probably are aware right now that, and it's being covered live on basically every news station, basically, and anyone on YouTube that covers politics at all, they're rushing to make videos on the subject right now. I'm gonna analyze it in some level of depth, so perhaps it'll be a little bit more cerebral than what some people are saying. Oh, protests are evil, or Trump's Hitler or something. You saw in Chicago, Trump was planning to hold a rather major rally there. Protesters showed up. It's now been reported that they were egged on to do this by MoveOn.org, sort of the Soros side of the Democratic Party. In order to disrupt the rally, some of them infiltrated inside, several thousand of them, it appears. At least I'd say 1 or 2,000 were outside. Police were called. Trump ended up canceling the event. Specifically, I guess, out of a worry that there was a security concern, which was a legitimate point, I think. You can't have a rally of 15, 20,000 people and have potentially hundreds of protesters in the actual rally and many thousands more potentially amalgamating outside, and hope that a relatively small, it appears, police force is capable of preventing mayhem from occurring. It would be a terrible idea. Trump's life could end up in danger in such a situation. Certainly the protesters, the police, and his fans would get into a violent confrontation if that were to happen. So I guess the right decision ultimately was made. However, I'd like to point out my analysis of what this is likely to do. You saw some responses. Rubio was called up on Fox. Nobody else is going to fucking talk to Rubio. Basically lambasting it, saying it was horrible, it was disgusting. I kind of agree with that sentiment. I'll get into my own feelings about what just happened myself. And then they talked to Cruz, and Cruz appears to have supported the protest. Oh, well, we have a divided nation under Obama, and this is just more of the same. You see, Cruz is using the tactic of trying to declare now that Trump is the insider, which is not, it's not working, obviously. People understand that it's not true. Cruz is the one working with the Bush family right now, so I don't know what he's on about. I imagine this, I don't know what possessed Ted Cruz to think it was a good idea to side with protesters who then literally 15 minutes later are linked to a George Soros website, sort of the Bernie Bros and Black Lives Matter movements. I can't think of a movement or a site or an organization that the average Republican partisan, a lot of them back Cruz, would like less than this sort of thing. And Cruz makes the epic mistake of coming out 10 or 15 minutes before that is actually pieced together, and the announcement that yes, it was MoveOn.org that did this was made. What possessed him to think it was a good idea and come out and appear to be supporting the protest against Trump's rally? Now, my own feeling is this. Everybody in this country has the right to protest. These protesters were well within their rights to stand outside chanting, holding signs, and doing whatever. When they begin attempting to infiltrate a political rally, and you don't generally see this at anybody else's rallies, possibly because there aren't enough fucking people there to bother infiltrating them. When they begin attempting to buy up all the tickets or reserve all the slots so they can load the audience with people who either don't show up or they do show up and then they just raise hell, that is not, I believe, a peaceful protest or a peacefully assembled protest, generally speaking. I think that rises to a sort of different level. Should it be illegal for them to do this? No. But then again, should it be illegal for the police to come and kick them out of the rally if they're being that disruptive? No, of course. If you're going somewhere and your only goal in going there is to raise hell, to raise shit, and you're inside a venue which is being reserved for a specific purpose, you're going to get kicked out. It's like if you went to a sports game and all you did was sit there and drink beer and be a loudmouth and take your shirt off and start dancing around, shouting and making obscene gestures. You're going to get kicked out. It's exactly the same thing. Part of the media reported, oh, well, it's a non-violent sort of protest. Well, that's not what I'm seeing. I saw a great deal of fighting going on, both inside the venue and outside. Some of these media firms appear to have been wishful thinking about their whole Black Lives Matter pets, the people that they really enjoy. Black Lives Matter, let's not kid ourselves, at this point, is not a social reform movement. It's no longer, it may have originated that way. It's no longer a social reform movement. It's been taken over by a bunch of anarchists and communists and socialists. It's now a political movement. That's all it is. I mean, even somebody like Sanders is not immune to their wrath. They are little more than a black nationalist political entity at this point that happens to have socialistic leanings. That's really all they are. The so-called leaders and representatives of Black Lives Matter don't even care about the original issues that brought the movement into being. They don't care about Trayvon Martin, who attacked a man and got killed by that man in self-defense. They don't care about Michael Brown. They don't care about Rice. Tamir Rice, by the way, I do think was murdered unlawfully by the police, and I would say the family has a totally legitimate concern about justice in that case. It's no longer about these things. It's become just a rallying call for a bunch of social justice warriors. And I see people conflating the social justice warrior sort of bullshit with the hippie era. They're not even remotely the same. The hippies were a bunch of people who said government bad, government authority bad, we should do what we want. They were a bunch of fucking libertarians. They weren't arguing, hey, I want more free shit. They were arguing, I don't want to be sent over to some foreign theater to get shot at and die. They have nothing whatsoever in common. The hippie era protesters went out into fields and mountains and smoked pot and dropped acid. They didn't like government. They didn't like the Democratic Party. They didn't really like the Republican Party, which at the time was the Reformist Party, believe it or not. They didn't like any government. They might have tolerated a libertarian movement or an ANCAP movement or anarcho-primitivists or something like that. They didn't have any love really for government. Some of them had communist or socialistic leanings. Most of them were apolitical or completely bitter towards the political concept of politics. They didn't care about these things. Now you have people saying, oh, well, we're the modern hippie movement or something. No, you're not. You're just a bunch of idiots. The difference is this. In the hippie era, people were saying government needs to be much more heavily constrained or abolished altogether, and they were just total anarchists. Government has done this and that and the other thing, and they're all evil. Segregation, that's evil, government policy. Vietnam War, evil, government policy. Surveillance, these police that keep beating us up for wanting to smoke weed. They're all evil. The government and all the arms of the government, it's all evil. The modern social justice warrior movement doesn't say government is evil. They say certain people within the government are evil. We like Obama, or we like Bernie Sanders, or maybe Hillary, or we like Elizabeth Warren. They'll choose a few people who are really far left that they happen to like. It's just a political movement. It's a neo-progressive political movement. That's all it is. And the same holds true for all of these other groups associated with Black Lives Matter, seeking to use it as a tool to make themselves beyond reproach by the media and by those who are college age and those that are very politically correct. You see, you get a group of anarchists or communists, 99% of them are going to be white, unless they're followers of some Spanish anarcho-punk band, something from Mexico or something like that. Otherwise, most of them, they're a bunch of upper middle-class suburban whites who are angry at their parents. They're angry at the government for not giving them enough welfare. They live in their basement and they eat Doritos and they drink fucking Mountain Dew. And that's all they do. And so they seek to associate themselves with, yeah, Black Lives Matter. We love black people too, just don't live too close to our neighborhoods because they're lily white. And they'll seek to use that to make themselves seem as though they can't be criticized because now they're allies of the black man. You didn't see this back in the hippie era. You saw people who actually cared because they actually saw black people getting lynched and beaten in the streets on a regular basis. Not so now. These people don't give a fuck about the black community. And by the way, the Democratic Party's frontrunner right now is the wife of a man who passed the federal 3 strikes ordinance, which threw millions of black people into prison for elongated terms. I don't care what you fucking say. Hillary Clinton is going to continue that sort of nasty-ass policy. The inner cities will continue to fall apart. The drug war will continue. The inner city gangs will continue. The border will never be solved. There will continue to be massive cartel activity south of the border. They'll come right across. You're not going to get your legal marijuana. You probably wouldn't get it under Bernie either. You're more likely to get it under Donald Trump's presidency than you are under Bernie Sanders' presidency. So that's what I think about the modern social justice warrior movements. They are the same kind of filth that cluttered up the airwaves, passed a bunch of stupid moral laws in the 1970s and 1980s, only the last time around. The pearl-clutching social justice warriors, you can't say this and that because it offends me, were a bunch of Christian moralists claiming that heavy metal was an agent of Satan, that premarital sex should be banned, that gay people were going to molest your children. The last time around a few decades ago, it was a bunch of Christian right-wingers doing that. Now it's a bunch of self-proclaimed anarchists, self-proclaimed communists, self-proclaimed socialists, self-proclaimed BLM, all of which are using white capitalist technology to do this. I don't understand why this makes sense. These people in BLM, they will rant long and hard about how bad the police are, how bad they're treating them. Okay, granted, the police in many of these precincts are brutal. Who do you think fucking installed them? Who's the mayor right now in Chicago? Who's the mayor overseeing the police of Chicago? Who is it? Is it some right-wing Republican who backs, Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio or Donald Trump? No, it's an Obama ally, a Democrat named Rahm Emanuel. Well, why aren't you complaining about that? I just don't understand it. What I think is going to happen from this is that millions and millions of white middle-class suburban and urban individuals within the general area, within the Rust Belt, they were all in favor of Ronald Reagan when he ran for office. They were called the Reagan Democrats. They gave him a landslide election. They fucked Jimmy Carter because, of course, Carter had fucked up the economy. It wasn't all his fault, but he got the blame for it, the lion's share of the blame. So millions and millions of former Democrats, they ran over to the Republican Party. They gave him a landslide election. What's Trump doing right now, even more effectively than Reagan did in 1980 or 1984? He's drawing in those same Democrats. Hundreds of thousands of Democrats are defecting from the Democratic Party. The older Democrats, the ones that remember Reagan especially, are going to flock to him. His turnout is going to be so high in Illinois on March 15th. If I had confidence before that Trump had Illinois, I'm certain now. He'd probably win by a double-digit margin, higher than I expected. He's likely to roll that over into a significant boost in support in Ohio. Definitely, I would say Florida. Anywhere where there's any racial tension at all. Look at Florida. They've got the Zimmerman, Trayvon stuff. Illinois, you have what just happened. You have the same thing all over the fucking country. The problem is this. The social justice warriors are mostly white. They're not majority black or majority minority. Most of these people are white. They're just very bored college-age kids pretending that they're similar to the social movements of the 1960s. They're not protesting against a war. They're all in favor of Obama, who's dropping bombs on civilians in the Middle East. Well, fucking shame on you. You're not a fucking hippie. You're not a peacenik. Oh, you smoked weed 2 times. Well, good for you. How progressive, how multicultural and tolerant. You have a black friend. Bravo, bravo for you. You're so progressive and tolerant and open-minded. No, you're not. You have nothing in common with the social movements of the past. They were fighting against a monstrous war machine. You've accepted the war machine because the president happens to be a Democrat. And you're convinced that the Democratic Party, headed, again, by Hillary, one of the insiders within the 3 strikes rule that you've railed against for years now, that's one of the prime reasons why the police in inner city areas are so brutal. One of the reasons why the drug war has rolled over into so much urban violence in this country, you're actually applauding this person. And you're also applauding Sanders, who has put forth not one proposal to end any of these things. He says he's going to end mass incarceration. Okay, how? Are you going to let a bunch of nonviolent drug offenders out of prison? What about people who are convicted of other victimless crimes? Are you going to let them out? The drug war doesn't just involve drugs anymore. It involves a lot of ancillary violence that goes on in the inner cities that no longer even have anything to do with drugs. Prostitution, gambling rings, making bootleg liquor still happens in parts of this country because of federal regulations. Are you going to do anything about those people? No, you're just going to let them slip through the cracks. By the way, Bernie Sanders says whites don't even know what it's like to be poor. Good way to alienate a large proportion of your fan base, Mr. Sanders. Really, really smart idea. Ted Cruz fucked himself so royally tonight. I don't even know if will he even get a single vote. Is there anybody here? If you're a Ted Cruz fan, please be honest with me. Does it not strike you as slightly strange that the same person who will point to Donald Trump and say, well, he's just a Democrat, he backed Hillary, he's just like Hillary, is now siding with a bunch of people who were goaded on to shutting down Trump's rally by MoveOn.org? Does that not strike you as even a little bit strange? Right after he meets with Neil Bush and absorbs him into his campaign, has a high-level talk with Jeb Bush and with George W., same one Marco Rubio does. You find it a little bit odd? I do. I'm not even a Trump supporter. I find it odd. I find everything odd every single day that goes on in D.C. The fact that people even tolerate this bullshit is odd to me. I forsook the two-party system specifically because of this. I am anti-war. I don't care what race a person is. If they're a shit fuck, they're a shit fuck. If they're not a shit fuck, they're not a shit fuck. Doesn't really matter how much melanin is in their skin at the end of the day. They're either a shit fuck or they're not a shit fuck. Ted Cruz is a shit fuck. Hillary Clinton is a shit fuck. Bernie Sanders' jury was originally out. I thought maybe he wasn't a shit fuck, but with his white people don't know what it's like to be poor stuff, now I think he probably is a shit fuck. Rubio, I don't even think Rubio is a shit fuck so much as he's just really, really inept. I think that he's just a blunderer, choker in chief, as Trump would term. Kasich's not a true shit fuck. He gets a pass on that one. Kasich's, okay, he's the sort of person, it'd be very funny to have a game of Risk or Stratego with him. I imagine the conversations would flow quite easily. Trump's not a shit fuck, folks. He's not even a racist. He doesn't care what race you're from. Immigrant is not a race. Islam is not a race. It's very funny to me that these people in Chicago or elsewhere, they'll go and they'll shit up a Trump rally. They'll say that he's racist, he deport this, hates black people or whatever. And yet they'll go to a Clinton rally and hold up a Hillary sign, yay Hillary. And her own husband was largely responsible for the plight of the modern inner city. It's not a Republican policy. It was passed by Bill Clinton. And she was glowingly in favor of this and basically told the blacks to know their place at the time. But then again, that shouldn't come as a surprise to you. The modern Republican Party moved away from sort of the Hubert Humphrey stuff. The Democratic Party reabsorbed a lot of the higher level individuals at the time because they were Southern Democrats to begin with. They were sort of on the fence for a while. And the hippies stood against them. It was I believe, 68. The Democratic convention was the one getting trashed by a bunch of hippies. It wasn't the Republican convention. You're not some Vietnam-era protester with long hair who likes John Lennon and stands against all war and not just the wars you happen to pick and choose. You're not like that. You're a poser, honestly. So yeah, violence has erupted in Chicago and the rally gets canceled. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, it's going to give Trump more support. The Reagan Democrats were already, filtering into his support base. Now they're going to flood in. In fact, a lot of the white suburban Democrats, they're really just, they're Democrats because they have it in their heads that the Republican Party is bigoted or wants Jesus too much. Trump doesn't really fall into that category. He pretends. He makes a big show about pretending to be a really religious person. I'm not taken in by it. I don't think most of his fans know. He's not religious, folks. Come on. Neither was Reagan. Reagan, by the way, as an interesting aside, I'll say this. If you ever watched the Mondale-Reagan debate, do it. Watch the Mondale-Reagan debates. It's a good idea. Then you'll know how the Gipper spoke. By the way, he wasn't quite as well-spoken as many people remember him as being. In fact, he sounds a lot like Donald Trump. He even looked a little bit like him in a few ways. When Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale were having it out, what was one question posed towards Reagan? Well, you don't go to church, and some people feel this means that you don't believe in the Christian faith enough. What does Ronald Reagan say? Well, I realize that if I go to church, people could be targeted because I'm there. Basically, someone might bomb the church or try to shoot him or something, and other people get hurt. So he talked to God, and he talked with his pastor, and they agree. And God and his pastor agreed. Yeah, it's okay if you don't go to church because other people might get hurt, and you don't want to be responsible for that. And that's basically when he sealed re-election. People. You couldn't argue your way around him. Trump is doing the same fucking thing, folks. Do you not understand? He would have had... Look, Trump is used to having 10, 15, 20,000 people at his rallies. A small Trump rally pulls in 5,000 people. That's like the upper limit that anybody else is getting. Rubio was hard-pressed to scrape together like 300 or 400 at the last rally he had in Florida, in his own home city, by the way, which was... It's mind-boggling how much support he's lost. Trump is used to having large rallies. They get put on YouTube, and they get analyzed, and the media will take a few clips from them and say, oh, here was Donald Trump's big rally today, 25, 30,000 people. Instead, he's getting wall-to-wall coverage and has for the last couple of hours. He's on there. He's forced Rubio to agree with him. After Rubio just fucked himself again, by the way, involving Kasich. You heard about it earlier, I'm sure. Got Cruz on there. Cruz stumbled completely, and right after he comes out and says that the protesters are doing some great fucking thing, comes out, oh yeah, that's right, it was a George Soros site that caused them to do this. How fucking embarrassing must this be for fucking lying Ted? He fucked himself. He pulled a Rubio. Rubio fucked himself a few days before Super Tuesday, remember. He was going in fairly strong, and then he fucked himself, and that's why he got fucked the last time around. Dude, now Ted Cruz has done it. Now who knows how much attention specifically it's going to get from the media. A lot of them really love Ted Cruz because he's the only viable person left who's not Donald Trump, and they're terrified of Donald Trump. I don't know, they think he will become the next Hitler or something. No, but how fucking embarrassed must he be? And tomorrow, all you're going to hear about on the news is this protest, folks. You're not going to hear about anything else. You're going to hear about a bunch of people in Chicago from Black Lives Matter and the Bernie Bros and goaded by MoveOn.org. You're going to hear analyzed over and over. It's not just going to be on Fox, folks. It's going to be everywhere. How they're trying to shut down the free speech of Trump supporters. Now, obviously, the supporters weren't really the ones planned to speak. Trump was going to be the one speaking at a rally, and he's trying to get a political office. So his threshold of freedom is a little bit different from the average person. He doesn't have all these additional rights necessarily. But it does set itself up well for good comparisons between the behavior of these protesters and their stated intent and goal. If their stated intent and goal is, well, we're exercising our free speech and our right to assemble here, well, that's what the Trump supporters were doing. So there's a little bit of an analysis of this, a little bit of a rant, but it's got to be spoken of. We have to expose. I say this not as a Republican, not as a Trump fan. I say this as a libertarian. We have to expose social justice warrior bullshit for what it is. It is the same bullcrap we already suffered through in the 80s and into the 90s with the evangelical pearl clutchers constantly trying to censor things, ban things, and expand government power because they felt offended by other people. It is the same thing. It is same shit, different asshole. The only difference is the pearl clutchers really, they had no problem with the Republican Party, even though half of those people aren't fucking religious. Reagan wasn't religious. Herbert Walker wasn't religious. None of them are. Trump's not religious, going back quite some distance. None of these people cared about religion. They pretended to get the votes of these same pearl clutchers. In turn, these pearl clutchers demanded new, shitty laws. And it made the country miserable. Now the social justice warriors are doing the same thing with people like Sanders and Obama. Thankfully, the pendulum is already turning back. My only worry is that now we're going to get a new wave of fucking moralists on the right wing. We shouldn't have moralism at all. It's antithetical to the Constitution. The founding goal of this nation was do what you want. If there's no victim, it's not a crime. We've gotten so far away from this bullshit. We have for, almost 2 centuries now. We've been going away from it. It's really retarded. People should be left alone. I don't care what Trump has to say at his rally. He should be able to say it. His supporters should be able to hear it. The protesters, they want to stand outside and chant all night. Go a fucking ahead and do it. If this had happened, if a bunch of Trump supporters had shown up at a Bernie rally and shouted him off stage, these people would be talking about how violent the Trump supporters are, how vicious. They're like brown shirts, and Trump's their Hitler. But it happens on the other side, and the media attempts to, again, spin it as though Trump somehow caused this problem. No, not really. This time you can't really fault him. You don't have to be a supporter of his to understand that. So there's my analysis of the Chicago protest. Helps Trump a great deal. He just got hundreds of thousands of voters when he only would have gotten maybe 10,000 if he had held the rally. Most of the people in the room probably would have, heard what he had to say and supported him. You got to realize some of the people going to Trump rallies, they're not even Trump fans when they go in. Some of them come out as Trump fans, some of them don't. This way, though, everybody at the fucking rally is going to become a Trump supporter unless they were solely there to protest Trump. Because now they feel personally incensed. They've been personally harangued by people who hate Trump. What's the natural reaction to this action? Support Trump. Go vote for him. And Illinois is an open primary. All the independents that see this on TV, they're going to flock to him. He's going to win Illinois probably now by a landslide. So yeah, there's my analysis of the situation. That's about all. Peace.